The next set of spoilers from the upcoming Legends of Runeterra expansion have been revealed, and they're all from the Freljord region. They consist of another brand new ability being added to the game, along with another new champion. In this video, we'll be covering the second champion revealed from the next set, Sejuani, as well as the new keyword known as vulnerable. Just like the last video, we'll be talking about what Sejuani does, how the new vulnerable keyword works in game along with the other spoilers shown, and I'll also be giving some initial thoughts on the decks Sejuani will likely fit best in, and how these new spoilers could affect the metagame. As always, I'm going to be very cautious when it comes to making meta predictions. It's fun to do, but we need to keep in mind that we haven't seen all of the cards in the set yet. So it's difficult to say whether Sejuani or vulnerable will be good or not, because for the most part we only have the base set to go off of, and the cards from this new set as a whole will be what changes the meta. Anyway, let's get right into it. Let's start off with Sejuani. Sejuani is a 6-mana champion in the Freljord region. She has 5 power and 6 health at level 1. She has Overwhelm, and when you play Sejuani, you give an enemy Frostbite and vulnerable for the remainder of the round. In order for Sejuani to level up, you must damage the enemy Nexus in 5 different rounds during the game. Keep in mind, Sejuani does not need to be in play to meet her level up requirement. But let's back up to her play ability. Specifically the new vulnerable keyword. The way vulnerable works is that any unit that gains vulnerable can now be challenged by any enemy unit, forcing it to block, even if that enemy unit doesn't have the challenger ability themselves. So this is almost like a reverse challenger ability, which is another keyword in the game that allows one of your units to choose an enemy unit on your opponent's bench and force it to block your unit. This time around though, out of all the cards spoiled so far, Sejuani is the only one with the vulnerable keyword, but we'll get to the other cards that were revealed in a bit. Anyway, when Sejuani levels up, she has 6 power and 7 health, keeps her Overwhelm and her summon ability, and in addition, the first time Sejuani sees you damage the enemy Nexus each round, she will frostbite all enemies. I just want to say that I love the way the vulnerable mechanic works. Not only do I like the fact that it works similar to a reverse version of Challenger, but I love how flavorful the keyword is from a design perspective. It feels very much in line with what Freljord is all about, a group of tribes that know how to survive in the harsh winter wilderness. It's like seeing the hunters of the Freljord going after their weakened prey that's now vulnerable, if you know what I mean. While this new keyword shares a lot of flavor with Freljord, I think we could see this keyword in other regions as well where it would make sense. Noxus and Shadow Isles both come to mind. As far as how Sejuani should be used, she seems like a pretty flexible champion, which is honestly welcome as there's so many champions in this game that are hard locked to a specific mechanic, and usually when that's the case they end up in weaker build around type decks, but not always. 6 health is really tough to remove in this game, and I don't think set 2 is going to change that fact. The only other unit in the meta right now that really wins out in a fight against Sejuani is Cithria, and that's only if Sejuani is still at her level 1, and if Sejuani hasn't targeted Cithria beforehand. I'm most excited for trying her in Vladimir decks, especially given the other spoilers we'll be talking about in a little bit. But I can definitely see her in almost any Freljord midrange deck. I don't think any deck should focus on leveling her up quickly, however. In order for her to be leveled up by turn 6, you'd need to damage the enemy Nexus every single round of the game prior to round 6, which is nearly impossible. You end up running some weird aggro deck with a bunch of Noxus early drops, hoping to deal Nexus damage every turn before dropping this mid-range champion that costs 6, that doesn't even fit your deck that well. Anyway, I'm excited for Sejuani and expect her to find a place in the meta somewhere. Next, let's talk about the other cards that were revealed with Sejuani, and let's start off with Fury of the North. This is a 4-mana burst spell that grants an ally +4/+4 until the round ends. I like this card, though I'm a bit skeptical, but let's start off with the positives. I think this card is great in decks that have access to units that have some type of evasion. What I mean by evasion is that the units have some natural way to get past blockers in order to do direct damage to the Nexus. In Legends of Runeterra, those units come in the form of fearsome units, elusive units, and units with overwhelm. I think this card could actually replace Twin Disciplines in more of a throwback variant of elusives that doesn't run Kinko Wayfinder, if we're talking existing decks. But I also think this card has potential in a deck sporting a bunch of overwhelm units, which this batch of spoilers showed quite a bit of love to, by the way, but we'll get to the rest of the cards later. I think as far as an overwhelm deck, despite what was revealed, we'll need to see what the rest of the set has in terms of overwhelm. I hope there's more because in my opinion, the base set is sorely lacking as far as good overwhelm cards. There are very few units with the keyword to begin with, and even fewer cards that grant overwhelm that are compelling to play. My one big concern with this card is the fact that it costs 4 mana, which is even more than Twin Disciplines, a card that's already fairly clunky to play at times in elusive decks. I think its cost is fair, but 4 mana just might be a bit too expensive to play in faster decks. This might hit the sweet spot for slower mid-range decks, however. Let's talk about Ruthless Raider next. This is a 2 mana unit with 3 power and 1 health that has overwhelm and tough. Once again, we see a unit that has a lower health total than what's standard for a 2-drop that tries to make up for it with additional abilities, which I think Ruthless Raider does in this case. In particular, her tough ability. Because she has tough, Ruthless Raider avoids the normal weaknesses that other 1 health units have, and that weakness is being killed by ping effects that deal 1 damage like Vile Feast and Avarose and Marksman. This also means that she isn't killed by other units that deal 1 damage to your own units, or that deal 1 damage to everything when an effect happens during a game. These are cards like Crimson Awakener and Tarkaz the Tribeless. Because of this, I think Ruthless Raider can be very good in Vladimir decks sporting the Crimson cards. Ruthless Raider will never die to Vladimir's or Tarkaz's ability in combat, and she even gets a free power boost from Crimson Aristocrat without dying to the 1 damage. I think she can be a consideration in other types of decks, but she'll be a bit less powerful in those. If there's any deck where Ruthless Raider is going to shine, it will probably be a Vladimir deck. Next, let's talk about Ember Maiden. 3 mana with 3 power and 2 health, and at the start of each round, she deals 1 damage to everything. I think this card is good, but I think it's being a little overhyped for what she does. It's great that she has an area of effect for 1 damage that hits everything at the start of the round, but keep in mind that the everything text includes herself. I think she will also be good in Vladimir decks, maybe even a core card that helps the deck function because she does give the deck some much needed removal for small units in a 3/2 body. But I don't think she single-handedly puts the deck over the top. Personally, after spending time with Vladimir, the deck is closer than people think. It just needs to be built correctly. Despite being a 3-drop, I think she does compete with other units that have AoE effects that hit your own units like Crimson Awakener, because you can't have too many of those effects in your deck. She'll show up in Vladimir decks for sure. Just don't expect Ember Maiden to last on the board for too long. There was also another follower card called Stormclaw Ursine that was revealed, but there isn't as much to talk about this card as it seems. The reason why is that there's no rarity on this card, which means this card is actually a token, which is a card that's made by another card. So this is a card you can't actually put into your deck from what we know so far. I will say that based on what I've heard in the community, the card that makes Stormclaw Ursine is linked to another keyword that Riot has not revealed yet and wants to wait until later to actually showcase. So this token card is basically a tease until then. This thing is extremely powerful though. Ursine is a win condition on its own, so I'm sure that whatever card is linked to this will garner its own deck, as some deck builders are going to be interested in building a deck around generating this guy to win the game. That's all I've got for you guys today. I'm very excited for what other possible regions get the vulnerable keyword, for the seemingly beefed up Vladimir decks, and for Sejuani in general. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like the video below or even share it with others. Both help to get the video out there to others in the community here on YouTube. I'll be looking to cover more of the new cards as they're spoiled over the next few weeks, so if you don't want to miss those videos, or any other videos I put out, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell icon. And feel free to follow me at the other social media places I hang out at. You can catch me streaming Runeterra live on Twitch as well as hanging out on Twitter and even my own Discord. Links to all of those are in the video description. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you next time. Take care.